Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Trader Group, and this is a quick, very quick end of day market recap for you. We have a webinar coming up at 5 o'clock on the MarketWebs, which we're going to be going over kind of like part two in our discussion of the MarketWebs on TradingView. And the first one that we did, I think about 3 weeks ago, was basically just an intro to the MarketWebs. What are they? And this one today will be more, how do you trade with them? So more strategies. And, we want to go over questions too for those of you who have signed up to the free trial for that and go by, step by step, just Q&A, anything that you have, either just definitions or trading strategies. And of course, we'll go over all of ours. So that will be in. We'll be doing that in about 40 minutes, and I'll resend the link out on Twitter. But I wanted to just go through really quickly, of course, the FOMC days, which are always tricky to me. So before I do that, risk disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. So yeah, Fed days are kind of tricky because you don't know what Powell you're going to get, and you don't know how the market's really going to react to it. I think some of the best things to do are to keep an eye on, some of the macro indicators that I tend to look at, which is what the dollar is doing, what bonds are doing, and then just the price action. And IWM also is really nice to watch on days like this because it's going to be just more sensitive, especially to what the dollar and what interest rates are doing. So I thought that was an interesting, that was the first thing that we kind of saw really get going were the small caps. But in regard to like what he said, because I know like everybody wants to know, well, what did he say, that kind of caused the market to move? And I just think it's the fact that, again, I don't mean to touch upon politics, but they do play and role in what we're doing. And my view is last week we had the CPI report and the PPI report, which both were higher than expected. And so it's kind of funny because I think if that would have come out about a year ago, where we saw inflation really tick up like that, then I think they would have said, hey, we have one or two more interest rate hikes to go. But they've really kind of changed their tune. So even though they say that they're data dependent, I don't, inflation, the last week's inflation, and that's the second report that we've had that has shown like a major uptick in inflation. So I don't know, it's a head scratcher to me. I don't fully understand it. I don't have to fully understand it to profit from it, right? It's more important to kind of just take the cues from the market and kind of run with it than sit and argue with what you think should happen, right? That's not our job. That's someone else's job to do. Our job is just to interpret and then try to basically get the market signals and then basically run with them a little bit. So I think the conclusion of that is from Powell's meeting is that they're still going to, at some point, they're hooked on this notion that they might cut interest rates. Now, I don't necessarily believe that, but I think, again, going to the conclusion is they're not getting in the way of inflation running right now. So, these things can kind of continue to run unabated, right? And it is in an election year, and perhaps he's changed his tune, or the Fed has changed their tune because they don't really want to raise interest rates in an election year, even though inflation is moving higher. So now that you could argue about like purchasing power and so forth, again, we're talking about the market and how do we profit from this, right? And you can kind of see the reaction on some of the areas like gold miners and gold going up, right? And Bitcoin going up today too. So to me, it means like, the show goes on in terms of like, they're not pumping the brakes, and the federal government is continuing to kind of spend and stimulate. So now let's bring it to the market, and then we'll come back to a couple sectors. But this is what I was kind of waiting for, is whether or not we were going to stay in this range. And I talked about this earlier, that while we're staying in this range, it's more of like base hits, right? I'm using a lot of baseball analogies today because it's opening day, but but yeah, I mean, while we're going back and forth like this, and the breadth one day is okay, and then the next day the breadth is not great, but not horrible. It's more of a kind of a grind them out scalp type move. But now we finally have a decisive break of the value area, and you could see that we're still kind of moving up here. So this is a break, and it's basically kind of just the first move out of this. How many weeks have we been going sideways at this point? Basically about 2.5 weeks. Now, I still think that there's going to be some separation. It may not be an everything rally. The Qs, for one, it doesn't, the Qs have, broken through the value area, which is good, but I'm still skeptical of whether or not the Qs are going to lead here, or if it's going to be some commodity areas. And, I think copper is going to be really interesting to watch. So we'll talk about copper just for a second, and I'll bring up, I think I just brought this is the right one. This is the one I wanted to see, right? And copper, is kind of, let's see, I'm gonna just make sure I've got the right thing up here, and I do. So for now, like, copper kind of stalled right at the top of value. However, it had a decent day today. Let me just make sure I've got the right copper futures up. Where did copper finish for the day? Yeah, just slightly positive. So, maybe they might consolidate here. I'm just a little bit wary because this is right at resistance, right? When we look at the yearly value area. So, even though we saw some FCX call buying today, which I got involved in today because I think that this is a really good long-term chart, and it kind of helps to look at the weekly chart a bit without the value areas for the month. But this is a nice break here, right? And I was long SCCO last week, and I took some profits, and this has been the leader in the group. But you can begin to kind of look at tech resources too, which saw some call buying this afternoon. So very interesting to kind of look at these. And I think that you could be long tech resources versus 43.78. And I think also looking at what's been very strong is some of the housing plays too. And I don't mean just the straight up home builders, but this is one of the best, the strongest names on my spreadsheet for my watch list. This is they go into building different things, or go into the building of a house. This is Modine Manufacturing. I think they do some other things too, but those are my best name on the watch list this week, up over 10.5% from the trigger. So I've been continuing to kind of look for names. I was joking around yesterday with like a roofing company, right? I mean, this is a straight breakout. So, again, I think, having a broader horizon and letting some of these other areas break out, rather than like what we've seen over the last month. And maybe it won't be, considering I really think that Magnificent Seven, or the Great Eight, as I call them, kind of lost some leadership. Now, it doesn't mean that those names are kind of dead and going to really not do well. I think that buying into support for those names will do really well. And then there's Micron after the close today. So they, talking about going back to baseball, hitting the ball out of the park. This is a nice breakout here in Micron. So this might lift a couple of the names that have been a little bit stagnant. I would be watching Marvell tomorrow. That's a name that has seen a whole lot of call positioning over the last couple days, right? So again, you got a nice pullback here, and I would watch for this name to get back above and into the value area for confirmation purposes. Also, names like Dell, which we talked about yesterday, found support. So this is where, like, being a little bit more selective in tech, I think, is better, right? Normally we wouldn't see that much of a deep pullback, but a lot of things that I'm seeing on my charts are names that did this on earnings and are waiting to this 20-day moving average to kind of catch up. Another one that I highlighted yesterday was this drone company, right? Look at how far this thing went up and pulled back into it, and is now back above the the 20-day moving average. Also note where this thing, it stops right at that previous peak. One other group that I'm going to talk about, I could talk for another 15 minutes about all these movers for the day, but I'm going to bring up gold, and then I'm going to talk about financials really quickly. So here's gold, funds. Right. So gold, and it's kind of funny because sometimes the market kind of likes to mess with us a little bit because, I've been watching this gold, and I've had a position in gold, and I took some profits on the way up. And as this was kind of coming in a little bit, started to see this develop earlier today where gold looks like it wanted to kind of push out of this and not go all the way down to the 20-day moving average. I said, okay, well, I'm not going to add a gold trade on or add to my gold position in front of the Fed meeting, but look at how this finished for the day. So that's kind of just really nice textbook digestion here and a move higher. So I did add to my gold position today. Also saw a lot of silver calls today. Right. But it is kind of tough on a day, Fed day, because everybody seems to be just grasping for trades. Like we saw a big First Solar calls go up as well, and again, like this is a trade that, if you think that there's going to be more momentum in the market, then, this is something to keep an eye on. I would watch for First Solar. Notice where the bottom of value is. It's right around this 152.40 level. I would at least, wait for some confirmation if you're looking to play a solar name, which those names have been pretty beaten up. Also, so I mentioned with financials, really nice move at this point. So, I mean, it'll break to new highs for the financials. So again, looking at some other things than, basically just NVIDIA and, a couple of the names in that space. I think it's important to keep an eye on those names, but I think it's important to also watch some of these, other areas that are performing pretty well. All right, so I'm going to cap it there. Like I said, I could talk about a few other areas. I did add a couple trades today. I'll talk a little bit about that. But I like Uber a lot as a company, like fundamentally too, not only technically. And I've been waiting for this turn. DraftKings, so I added some Uber today. DraftKings, I kind of hesitated on the first move because I just didn't want to get involved in the momentum pre-Fed. But you do have a catalyst, which I talked about the other day, which with March Madness, and I think that's the best time to play this name is when you've got big sporting events that people are going to be wagering a lot more on. So you got a nice break there. And then I also like what's going on in things like Trex, which are the floor. I talked about roofing companies. Might as well talk about a couple flooring companies too. Trex making a nice move out of this consolidation here. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and hope to see you at the webinar, which starts at 5 o'clock. And have a great night, everybody.